I'm Julie Herman of Jaybird Quilts and Lazy Girl Designs, and welcome back to the Lily Sew Along. Now we are going to work on cutting our fabric. And for the purposes of the sew along, I'm actually going to be making two bags. I'm going to be making this one that I just showed picking out my fabrics for, and I'm going to make another one that looks similar to this so that you'll be able to pay attention to all the details as I show you the construction of the bag. Once you've decided on your fabrics, it's time to begin cutting. We're going to start with rotary cutting, some simple rectangles, and then some of those we will subcut into the specific shapes of the bag. So I have decided that this fabric is going to be my waistband. This fabric is going to be my front and back right, as well as one of my linings. This fabric is going to be my front and back left, as well as one of my linings. And this fabric is going to be my handle and my pockets. So we're going to begin with the handle and pockets fabric. So I'm just going to move these out of the way. And from our handle and pocket fabrics, which is half a yard, we're going to start by cutting the handle itself. And these directions are on page 1 of your pattern. We're going to cut a piece that is 3.5 inches by the width of fabric. We're not going to trim that down to any shorter yet, as we want to audition our handle length, which we'll do later in our sew along. So I'm simply going to line my ruler up. Let me make sure you can see. Line my ruler up one of the square edges of my ruler with my fold to make sure that I start with a square edge, because as you can see, my half yard is not perfectly square. I have less here and more there, and that's very common that it's not perfectly cut. So I'm going to go ahead and square this piece off. And I'm going to rotate it around, and I'm going to cut a 3.5 inch piece. And I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. And now I am going to rotary cut from here the two pieces for the inside and outside pockets, and the dimensions for those are on page 1. So I have a large square and I have a rectangle, and the large square is going to be my inside pocket, and the small rectangle is going to be my outside pocket. So I'm just going to go ahead and set those aside for now. And there's nothing else that I'm actually going to cut with my fabric right now. I'm going to wait until I have cut all of my interfacing and batting and attach that to these pieces before I continue cutting. The next thing to cut is the interfacing. And I suggest using a fusible lightweight interfacing, like Face It Soft. This is a 1 yard package. The pattern calls for either 2/3 yard of 45 inches wide or 1 1/3 yard of 20 inches wide. This interfacing is actually 22 inches wide, so 1 yard is perfect, and that's what's in this package right here. The pieces you're cutting are 11 inches in one direction, so the 22 is perfect, cut straight down the middle, and you can get all 4 pieces. And one thing to keep in mind with your interfacing is that these are cut larger, as well as the fabric is cut larger, so that in case there's shrinkage when you do your fusing, we're going to subcut our pieces afterwards. So if these happen to be 10 3/4 in one direction, that's okay. So go ahead and cut all 4 pieces of Face It Soft following the interfacing measurements on page 1. The last thing to cut is your fusible fleece. Currently, our Dreamy fusible fleece is not available, but we're working to bring that back to market as soon as possible. So in the meantime, just pick out your favorite fusible fleece product and cut the 2 rectangles as well as the handle piece as directed on page 1. The handle is going to be 1 inch wide, and I suggest you cut it the full 45 inches so that it matches the length of the handle fabric we cut, and you can decide your full handle length later on. One more thing that I want to mention about Face It Soft is that the directions tell you to pre-shrink it by submerging it in warm water for 15 minutes and then allowing it to air dry. I'll be honest, I've never done that, and I've never had a problem with it. If you're concerned, I would just lightly mist this with a spray bottle, give it a little bit of water to help it shrink, and then go ahead and use it. In the example I'm about to show you, I'm just going to use it straight out of the package. Now that I've begun my cutting and I have all my interfacing pieces cut, I'm going to go ahead and finish prepping all of my fabrics so that I can continue cutting the pieces for my bag. You should have 2 interfacing pieces the same size, one for your right front and one for your left front. And we're going to start with those. This is our thin Face It Soft, and we're simply going to attach this to our fabric. Our fabric is about an inch bigger, which is what it should be. So I'm going to go over towards the edge, but not onto my selvage. And I'm going to interface this piece on and then trim. I'm just going to press lightly from the back, and I'm going to hold my iron for about 10 to 15 seconds. And if your piece happens to be bigger, you'll want to make sure that you're using a pressing cloth so you don't get any of the glue on your iron or on your ironing surface. And I'm simply going to move myself around the piece. So now that that's pressed, I'm simply going to trim the rest of the fabric off. I'm going to use some of the remaining fabric for my lining. I'm going to set this piece aside and get my other front fabric and repeat that process just as I did. If you have fabric like this and you plan on fussy cutting, there's a couple extra things to keep in mind. Normally, you're going to take your interfacing, fuse it to the wrong side of your fabric, and then we're going to go ahead and cut our pieces. But depending on where you fuse this, you might not get the right things for exactly what you want fussy cut. So I suggest starting with your templates. You can either have your paper ones and kind of eyeball covering what you want, or have your clear ones. Not sure how well you can see them. It looks like you can see them all right. So in this case, I know that I kind of want this lion towards the bottom of the back, kind of bottom center. And this one, I don't want it too high up because I don't want it to get caught in the pleats, but I also don't want too much in the dart, so I'm going to kind of go here. So then I'm going to take this and place it over and see. It looks like it does give me enough room to cut everything. If it didn't, if your fabric is not this lion and it's something where your things are spaced further apart, go ahead and take your templates on top of your interfacing and cut your interfacing into two pieces, and then use this interfacing on the back of your fabric where you need it so that you can properly fussy cut what you want to cut. I'm going to use the remaining fabric to go ahead and press on my interfacing and my batting for my lining. So instead of the inside being pieced with the lining, one side is going to be one fabric and one will be the other. The one that is the interfacing is going to have the pleats and be technically the front of the bag, and there will be no pockets on that side. And the one with the fleece is going to be the one that is the back, that is going to be the one that has the pockets. So if it matters to you which fabric your pocket is going to contrast off of, keep that in mind when choosing your inside. So I'm going to go ahead and press this one on for my inside lining. And the last piece that I need to do for the main part of my bag is my second lining. And this is going to be my back lining. This is my one piece that is going to have fusible fleece. It's just going to give the bag a little bit more body than the thin interfacing. So in this case, I like to press from the fabric side. I find that the heat doesn't transfer all the way through fusible fleece as well. So I position it and then I flip my project over. And I am pressing with no steam, with a dry iron. And I like to do a little peel up just to make sure it's sticking, to make sure that the heat is transferring well to the fusible fleece. And then I continue around my project. And again, I'm doing the same that I did with the other ones, which is pressing for about 10 to 15 seconds in each area and then moving. I find that sometimes with the fusible fleece, the weight of the iron kind of presses the shape of the iron in. So once I've adhered the whole thing, I like to give it one nice press across the top just to kind of smooth it out and remove any of those indentations if they happen to occur. And then I'm just going to trim this like I trimmed the other pieces and set these aside until I'm ready to cut my actual bag pieces from my templates. And the last thing that I need to fuse is my waistband fabric. The fabric requirements for this are a 1/4 yard. You can also use a fat quarter. That's what I'm using here in this case. And you will have two rectangles that are the same size, one that is your fusible fleece and one that is your thin interfacing. And that will give the waistband a little bit more body to have the combination of the two when we put the bag together. So if you're using a quarter yard, you will line them up like this along the fabric. Since I'm using a fat quarter, I'm going to turn them. If you have a directional fabric that needs to be cut a certain way, keep that in mind when purchasing your fabric. You should now have 6 rectangles that either have interfacing or fusible fleece all fused to them, 2 pocket pieces, 1 handle, and then 1 piece of fusible fleece to create your handle. In the next video, we're going to make our pockets and our handle. We are also going to cut out our bag pieces from our interfaced fabrics. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos in the sew along. If you haven't already signed up to receive the sew along emails, you can do that in the caption below. See you soon.